I held the official toxicology report in my hands and felt my fingers go numb with horror. A dangerous dose of a synthetic neuroleptic had been detected in the remains of my morning tea. This drug was methodically turning me into an unconscious vegetable right in my own kitchen. My perfect mother-in-law, whom the entire city considered a saintly benefactor, was serving me this poison with a smile every single day. But the most nightmarish part wasn't that. My name is Madeline. I am 28 years old. I worked as a remote graphic designer, and I had always considered myself a person with a clear mind and an analytical approach to life. In my world, everything followed logic: deadlines, layout grids, color schemes, and yearly plans. Up until a certain point, I was devoutly convinced that I had been incredibly lucky in marriage. My husband Caleb was the embodiment of a dream. Attentive, empathetic, and a great listener, he surrounded me with warmth from the very first minute we met in a cozy little cafe by the park. When we first started dating, he was honest and open about the fact that he had 2 failed marriages behind him. Caleb would always lower his eyes guiltily, sigh, and say, "Madeline, I've just been catastrophically unlucky. My ex-wives turned out to be very unstable people. The first, Hannah, suffered from severe depression and uncontrollable fits of rage, and the second, Mila, at one point simply lost touch with reality completely. I tried to save them. I exhausted myself, but they both broke and disappeared into oblivion. I'm afraid to trust people again." I sincerely pitied him. In my eyes, he looked like a broken, noble man who just needed a calm, rational, and truly loving woman. I was sure that things would be different with me. After all, I knew how to communicate, set personal boundaries, and resolve conflicts without drama. The central figure in Caleb's life was his mother, Isolde. She was a poised, 60-year-old woman with perfectly styled gray hair, the upright posture of a former ballerina, and that captivating scent of expensive lavender perfume and homemade almond cookies. Everyone in the city knew her. Isolde headed the local charity foundation, sponsored orphanages, and organized annual auctions. When Caleb introduced us at her spacious mansion, Isolde hugged me so warmly, as if she had known me my whole life. "Caleb needs such a strong, rational anchor, dear Madeline," she cooed over dinner, stroking my hand with her cold fingers, adorned with vintage rings featuring dark cameos. "You are exactly the one who will finally heal his wounds after those wretched, sick girls. You have no idea what kind of hell my boy has been through." I melted. I was proud that the perfect mother-in-law had accepted me with an open heart and saw me as her son's savior. For the first 6 months, everything truly felt like a fairy tale. But the first warning bell rang exactly 1 month after our lavish wedding. I returned home from the print shop earlier than usual and found Isolde in our kitchen. She was calmly rearranging spice jars and organizing our personal drawers. To my silent look of confusion, she merely produced a set of keys from her purse with a meek, apologetic smile. "Oh, Madeline, Caleb gave me a spare set a couple of years ago," she explained softly, wiping the marble countertop with a napkin. "I just stopped by to make you dinner and wash the dishes. You have so much work, dear. You look so tired and pale." At that time, I politely but firmly said that Caleb and I preferred to manage our household ourselves, and I asked for the spare key back. Isolde didn't argue or express resentment. She only sighed sadly, placed the key on the table, and whispered, "Of course, dear. I just wanted to help. I won't get in your way." That same evening, Caleb looked at me with a slight, unusual detachment for the first time. "Madeline, why were you so harsh with Mom?" he said quietly as we went to bed. "She's just looking out for us. She gets lonely in that big house after Father's passing." "Caleb, this is our home. I don't want anyone coming in without our knowledge," I replied. "She is not anyone, Madeline. She is my mother." It was the first minor sting, but I dismissed it as the adjustment period of a young marriage. Then, 3 months later, we found out I was pregnant. This news should have been the peak of our happiness, but instead of joy, a persistent, sticky nightmare entered my life. From the very first weeks of pregnancy, my health deteriorated sharply and inexplicably. Isolde, upon learning about her future grandchild, burst into our lives with double the intensity. She brought her signature soothing infusion of rare herbs, insisting that I drink it every morning and evening to protect the fetal nervous system and prevent uterine hypertonicity. And from that moment, a terrifying process began in my body. I woke up every morning feeling heavy, as if lead had been poured into my veins. My fingers began to tremble, just barely, when I held my graphic tablet stylus. I used to be able to keep dozens of work deadlines in my head with ease, but now I could sit in front of a blank monitor for half an hour, not knowing where I was or what task I needed to complete. Caleb looked at me no longer with love, but with growing concern, through which a hidden, oppressive anxiety seeped. "Madeline, you forgot to turn off the stove again," he said quietly one evening, walking into the living room. I couldn't have forgotten, Caleb. I definitely turned it off. I checked before I sat down to work," I exclaimed, feeling panic grip my throat. "But the burner was on, Madeline," Isolde intervened silently, appearing from the shadows of the hallway. "You need rest, dear. Your nerves are failing. Pregnancy reveals hidden problems. Caleb, do you remember how it all started with Hannah? She also argued at first, insisting she had turned off the stove." At the mention of that name, Caleb flinched and lowered his eyes, and for the first time, I felt a cold sweat run down my spine. I hadn't forgotten the stove. I was sure of it. But how do you prove that to people who look at you with pity, as if you are a terminally ill patient? I tried to convince myself that it was just severe morning sickness, hormonal shifts, and typical absent-mindedness. But the next day, when Isolde was washing dishes in our kitchen after lunch, I accidentally glanced through the crack of the half-open door. I saw with my own eyes how my mother-in-law took a small vial out of a secret compartment in her purse, used a dropper to pull out a transparent liquid, and dripped it directly into my cup of healing tea. She then quickly hid the vial away and, with an absolutely calm face, carried the tray into my room. The drops of clear liquid slowly dissolved into the dark brew. I stood in the hallway, my back pressed against the cool wall, listening to my heart pounding in my ears. Every beat resonated with a dull ache in my temples. "Madeline, dear, where are you?" came Isolde's affectionate voice. I forced myself to take a deep breath, square my shoulders, and step into the room. A soft, warm smile was shining on her face. On the tray she held, a porcelain cup was steaming. "Here is your infusion, honey. Drink it while it's hot. It will help relieve your evening tension." I looked at the cup. Now I knew. In that scented steam, my death sentence was hidden. "Thank you, Isolde. I'll drink it a bit later. My throat is a little dry. I want to take a sip of water first," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "Oh, no. The herbal brew must be drunk hot. Otherwise, all the beneficial essential oils will evaporate," she insisted, stepping closer and extending the tray. A steely demand flashed in her eyes that I had never noticed before. "All right, I will right now," I smiled back. Taking the cup, I turned my back to her under the pretense of moving my laptop on the desk. With a quick, practiced motion, I lifted the edge of my thick cardigan, where I had hidden an absorbent sponge, and poured most of the contents into it. Then, I carefully raised the cup to my lips, pretending to take a large gulp, while only lightly moistening them. "That's a good girl," Isolde nodded, satisfied. "You already look calmer. I'll go wash the tray." As soon as she vanished from the room, I ran to the bathroom sink, thoroughly rinsed my mouth, and squeezed the sponge, transferring the poisonous brew into a pre-prepared, sterile specimen container. My body was still recovering from the previous doses. My fingers were trembling, small spots were dancing before my eyes, but my consciousness was clearing. Giving up the poison had yielded its first results. The fog in my head began to dissipate, and along with the clarity of mind came a wild, primal terror. I was in a trap. The next day, I decided to act. Caleb had left on a 2-day business trip to a branch office, and Isolde had gone to a Board of Trustees meeting. This was my only chance. I took a taxi to my mother-in-law's mansion. I still had the old spare key to her house, which Caleb had accidentally left in my car a long time ago. Isolda's mansion greeted me with dead silence. The house felt like a tomb, heavy curtains on the windows, the smell of old polish, lavender sachets in every corner, and portraits of Caleb from different stages of his life hung all along the hallways. Not a single photo of his ex-wives. Not a single picture of his father, as if they had never existed. I went up to the second floor to her office. It was a stern room with a massive oak desk and bookshelves reaching the ceiling. I began to search the desk. The drawers were stuffed with Charity Foundation documents, receipts, and invoices for icon restoration. Nothing suspicious. But I knew, a person who tracks every step of their victim won't throw away their records. In such people lives the pride of their work. In the corner of the office stood an antique floor safe, styled like an inlaid cabinet. I knelt before it. The code. What could the code be? Caleb's birthday? I typed it in. Error. The date the foundation was founded? Error. And then it dawned on me. I entered the date of Caleb's wedding to his first wife, Hannah. I remembered it from the newspaper archives I had managed to study the day before. The safe clicked. The heavy door slowly gave way. Inside, there were no gold bars or jewels. Resting in neat rows were thick binders and several old leather-bound notebooks. I pulled out the first binder. On the cover were the initials, H.R., Hannah Rivers. I opened it, and my blood froze in my veins. Inside were not just notes, there were photographs. Photos of Hannah, taken on the sly. Here she is crying in the car. Here she is shouting at Caleb on the street. Here she is sitting on the floor in the living room with a crazed look. And next to them, a detailed diary by Isolda, broken down by day. March 14th. Dosage increased to 10 milligrams. Hannah has begun to show uncontrollable bursts of anger. Planted the idea in Caleb's head that she has schizophrenia. Caleb is beginning to doubt her sanity. April 28th. Orchestrated a scandal at the charity gala. Slipped her a double dose in her glass of wine. Hannah made a scene in front of city officials. Dr. Warren prepared a statement for the court. Caleb signed the hospitalization agreement himself. Mission accomplished. Caleb is home again. I feverishly pulled out my phone and began to photograph every page. My fingers were slipping off the screen from sweat. I opened the second binder. M.R. Mila Rivers. November 12th. Mila turned out to be smarter than Hannah. Started refusing the tea. Switched to a concentrated solution in salad dressings and sauces. She handled the disorientation symptoms worse. She has a weak vestibular system. Got caught in a random accident near the store. Sent under Warren's care. Marriage annulled. And at the bottom of the safe lay a third binder. My binder. With photos of me walking down the street pregnant, with printouts of my medical records from our clinic, and with a clear dosage plan mapped out until the end of the 6th month of pregnancy. At that moment, the floorboards creaked behind me. I froze in place, not daring to even turn around. From downstairs, on the first floor, came the distinct sound of the front door closing and the click of familiar heels. Isolda had returned early. Chapter 2.3. On the Brink of Catastrophe. The tapping of Isolda's heels echoed against the marble steps of the staircase leading to the second floor. Click, click, click. Each step sounded like a gunshot in the confined space. I had, at most, 15 seconds. My heart was pounding in my throat so hard that a bitter, metallic taste of fear-induced adrenaline filled my mouth. I feverishly shoved the folders back into the safe. My hands were shaking, my fingers slipping off the metal edges of the binders. My own folder caught on the edge of the cabinet, and a few sheets with dosage charts fluttered onto the carpet. Damn, damn, damn! I hissed through my teeth. The footsteps were already in the second-floor hallway. Isolda wasn't hurrying. She was walking toward her study, humming a classical melody in a quiet voice. I grabbed the fallen pages, shoved them inside, slammed the heavy safe door shut, and spun the combination dial. Click! I lunged toward the oak desk, but I wouldn't have time to leave the room. The door opened inward. In the last second, I scrambled toward a tall bookshelf housing collector's editions and pretended to be engrossed in looking at the spine of a heavy tome on art history. The study door swung open. Isolde stopped on the threshold. She was wearing that same severe dark blue coat, and in her hands she held a leather folder with foundation documents. Her gaze, sharp, scanning, missing no detail, instantly locked onto me. The air in the room became heavy, as if before a thunderstorm. "Madeline?" Her voice sounded deceptively soft, but icy undertones cut through it. "What are you doing in my study? And how did you get in?" I forced myself to stand straight, turned my head slowly, and produced the most natural, embarrassed smile I was capable of. "Oh, Isolde! You startled me!" I caught my breath, mimicking surprise. "I'm sorry for coming in without asking. Caleb asked me to stop by before he left and find his old high school diploma. He said it might be here in your study. And the door on the first floor was unlocked. One of your gardeners must have forgotten to lock it when they left." Isolde didn't move. Her eyes slowly slid from my face to the bookshelf, then dropped to the floor, right to the base of the safe. My stomach coiled into a cold knot. I thought in a panic, did I drop a sheet? Is there a trace of sweat or a smudge left on the carpet? She took 3 slow steps into the room. Her heels dug into the carpet pile. She approached the safe, crouched down, and lightly ran a finger over the keyhole. "A gardener, you say?" She spoke quietly, without raising her head. "Strange. I personally locked the deadbolt twice before leaving." "It must have slipped." My voice sounded a bit raspy, but I cleared my throat immediately. "I knocked, no one answered. I came in, and then I saw these amazing books. You don't mind if I sit in the living room for a bit while I wait for Caleb? My head is spinning again." Isolde slowly stood up. There was no politeness in her eyes. There was calculating, predatory interest. She understood that I was lying. But I understood that she couldn't accuse me right then without revealing the existence of the safe. "Caleb's diploma is in a bank safety deposit box, Madeline," she said, stepping so close to me that I could smell that nauseating, suffocating scent of lavender again. "Caleb should have remembered that. Your memory, dear, leaves much to be desired. You are becoming so forgetful and so curious." She reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from my face. Her fingers were as icy as a corpse's. "Curiosity in your condition is very harmful to the baby, Madeline. Stress creates cortisol, and cortisol destroys the fetus. You need to have some tea and lie down. Let's go to the kitchen. I will pour you an infusion myself." She didn't take her eyes off me for a second. I was forced to follow her to the kitchen. Every movement Isolde made was calibrated to the millimeter. She took out the porcelain teapot, added the tea, and turned on the water. "I saw your design work, Madeline," she said, standing with her back to me. "You are a very talented girl. You were. It's a pity that, due to your illness, you will have to give up your profession." "What illness, Isolde?" I asked quietly, clenching my fists under the table so hard that my nails dug into my palms. She turned. Her face was once again masked in deepest sympathy. "Oh, honey, we both understand. You have the same genetic predisposition for emotional spectrum disorders as Hannah. Caleb hoped so much that this time would be different. He dreamed so much of a normal family. Yesterday evening, he cried on my shoulder, Madeline. He said he couldn't take it anymore if you finally lost your mind." Each of her words was a calculated blow. She wasn't just poisoning my body, she was methodically destroying my psyche, convincing me that my husband had already given up on me, that he considered me insane, and was preparing the ground for my removal. "Caleb loves me," I said firmly, even though everything inside me was cracking at the seams. "He loved Hannah too," Isolde smiled affectionately, setting a cup of dark brown liquid in front of me. "At first, and then he brought the documents for her hospitalization himself. Because living with a madwoman is hell, Madeline. Drink the tea, you'll feel better." I looked at the steam rising above the porcelain edges. This time, a bitter medicinal note was distinctly present in the scent. She had increased the dose. She saw that I was on the brink and decided to accelerate the finale. "I'll drink it at home, Isolde. It's time for me to go." I stood up abruptly, grabbed my bag, and headed for the exit. Madeline! Her voice caught me at the door. It wasn't loud, but it held a threat that made my toes curl. Remember, wherever you are, Caleb will always come to me, because I am the only constant in his life. And you are just a temporary, episodic character who will soon disappear. I bolted from the mansion as if from a plague house. Catching the first taxi I saw, I gave the address of the city clinical hospital in the neighboring district. I was shaking. My hands wouldn't obey me, and I could barely dial a number on my phone screen. I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. The photos! The main thing, I had photos of the pages from the safe. I tapped on the recent folder, and my breath hitched. Half of the photos were blurred due to my haste and trembling hands. The text on the pages of Hannah's diary had smeared into unreadable gray lines. Only 2 shots were legible: the cover of my folder with my last name, and 1 page with a dosage chart without any signatures or drug names. No! No, no, no! I burst out. These photos were not enough for an official accusation. Any experienced lawyer representing Isolde would say in court that this was just worthless garbage, written by me in a fit of the very paranoia I was suffering from. I needed chemical blood tests and fresh samples of the poison. I arrived at the laboratory, but at the entrance, a new blow awaited me. The toxicologist I tried to explain the situation to looked at me with extreme suspicion. "Young lady, you claim that your mother-in-law is slipping neuroleptics into your tea? Do you have a referral from a neurologist or a report from the police?" "No, I need to have my blood tested anonymously. I'm paying cash." "We don't conduct anonymous toxicology reports for criminal substances without a prosecutor's order," the doctor replied dryly. "Contact the law enforcement authorities in your jurisdiction." I stepped out of the clinic into the cold autumn air. Our local police department was headed by a close friend of Isolde, a man who received large sponsorships from her charity foundation every year for maintaining order. Going there without irrefutable evidence meant handing myself over to Isolde immediately. I was absolutely alone. My husband believed his mother and was on a business trip. My mother-in-law was methodically increasing the dose of poison. Doctors and the police demanded official paperwork. And my body was getting weaker by the day. The remaining toxins in my system continued to cause tremors and flashes of panic. At that moment, my phone vibrated. Caleb's name appeared on the screen. I squeezed the phone in my hands, took a deep breath, and hit answer. "Madeline?" His voice sounded anxious and strained. "My mother just called me. She's in tears. She says you came to her house, caused a scene, knocked a cup out of her hands, and screamed that she wants to poison you. Madeline, tell me the truth. What is going on with you?" Caleb's words over the phone felt like a punch to the gut. "She says you came to her house, caused a scene, knocked a cup out of her hands, and screamed that she wants to poison you." I stood by the hospital building wall in the biting wind. My fingers gripped the phone so hard the plastic casing nearly cracked. Thoughts whistled through my head. Isolde had moved ahead of me. She had delivered a preemptive strike so that, in Caleb's eyes, any word I said about substitution or poison would look like a continuation of that same mental breakdown. "Caleb, listen to me." My voice cracked, but I forced it to sound level. "You are believing a person who has been manipulating you your entire life. I didn't cause a scene. I went to pick up your things, and your mother—" "Madeline, stop it!" Caleb barked. For the first time in our relationship, I heard not just anxiety in his voice, but a dull, rising fury. "Mom is crying. She has given us her last ounce of strength. She cares about you, about our child, and you are searching for malicious intent in her every move. Hannah said the exact same thing before she was taken to the specialized facility, word for word." "Caleb, Hannah wasn't sick," I screamed directly into the receiver. "Your mother forged her medical records." "Enough," he cut me off. "I am returning from my business trip this evening. Dr. Warren will be with us. He will examine you right at our home. If you refuse—" "Madeline, I will sign the commitment papers myself. I don't want to lose the baby because of your phantoms." The line went dead. I lowered my hand holding the phone. That was it. The bridge was burned. My husband had stopped being a passive observer. He had turned into an executive tool in Isolde's hands. I had at most 6 hours before he arrived with the doctor. I knew that going to the local police without concrete, ironclad evidence was suicide. I didn't just need a lab document. I needed the people whose lives Isolde had ground into dust before me. In the diaries from the safe, I had managed to remember the name of the special facility where Caleb's first wife, Hannah, had been dumped. The Quiet Haven. A private, closed-door sanitarium 120 kilometers from the city, right on the edge of the province. An institution that Isolde's charity foundation had been sponsoring for the past 10 years. I caught an intercity taxi, gave the driver all the cash I had in my purse, and told him to drive like hell. The road to the sanitarium seemed endless. Outside the window, gray autumn forests flickered by, while the dosage charts from Isolde's folders swirled in my head. Scopolamine, haloperidol, the systematic destruction of a personality. The Quiet Haven was hidden behind a high brick wall in the middle of a dense pine forest. Cast iron gates, a wicket door with a keypad, and cameras around the perimeter. Everything looked less like a clinic and more like an elite prison for those whom their relatives had decided to erase from reality. I approached the wicket. A security guard at the checkpoint, a stocky man in uniform, climbed out of his booth, frowning. "Who are you here for? Visits are strictly by prior arrangement with family members." "I'm here for Hannah Rivers," I said, clutching in my pocket a fake press badge I had kept from my time working at a magazine. "I'm an independent journalist. We are conducting an audit of how the charity fund of Mrs. Isolde Rivers is spending its resources." At the mention of Isolde's name, the guard straightened up just slightly. "Are you with Mrs. Isolde? She didn't warn us." "Mrs. Rivers is conducting urgent checks," I interrupted him in a confident, steely tone. "If you make me wait in the cold now, I will note in my report that staff are obstructing a foundation audit." It worked. The name of the saintly benefactor opened any door in this province. The guard contacted the doctor on duty, and within 5 minutes, I was being led through long, sterile hallways, smelling of bleach and sauerkraut, to the second floor. A male nurse unlocked a heavy wooden door, one that had no handle on the inside, and nodded. 10 minutes, no more. The patient is in a phase of deep apathy." I stepped across the threshold. The room resembled a solitary confinement cell in a luxury hotel. A cot, a table bolted to the floor, and a window covered by a thick grate. On the bed, her legs pulled to her chest, sat a woman. Hannah was only 32, but she looked a good 50. Her once thick red hair had turned into thin, gray tatters. Her skin had an earthy hue, and her hands trembled continuously, a classic symptom of long-term use of heavy neuroleptics. She stared at a single point on the wall and swayed silently and monotonously. "Hannah?" I called out softly. She didn't flinch, not a thought or a spark of interest reflected in her eyes. I stepped closer, knelt before her cot, and gently placed my hand on her icy fingers. "Hannah, my name is Madeline. I am Caleb's wife." At the sound of the name Caleb, the woman's body jerked violently. A wild, animalistic fear flared in her glassy eyes. She tried to recoil against the wall, shielding herself with her arms as if from a blow. "No, don't! I won't drink the tea! I won't!" she screamed, hoarsely and with a rattle. "No shot, Dr. Warren! I'll sign everything! I'll give up the house! Just no shot!" My heart shrank into a cold knot. This wasn't an illness. This was the result of years of physical and psychological breaking. "Hannah, quiet, quiet! Warren isn't here. I'm not from Isolde." I frantically pulled from my bag the printed snapshot from the safe, that very blurred page with her name. "Look, I found her diaries. I know what she did to you. She was slipping you poison. You weren't crazy, Hannah." Hannah froze. Her breathing remained ragged, but for the first time, her gaze focused on my face. She looked into my eyes with incredible, gut-wrenching hope. She wrote about it?" Hannah whispered. The words were difficult for her lips barely obeying. Caleb. Does Caleb know? Caleb believes her, Hannah, I answered directly. And now she is doing the exact same thing to me. I'm pregnant, and if I don't stop her, I'll end up in the next room. Hannah slowly lowered her arms. Tears began to flow from her eyes, large, clear drops down her parched cheeks. She staged that accident. Hannah spoke in a quiet, even whisper, and each of her words cut the air like a razor. I found a vial in her purse. I screamed at her. I wanted to show it to Caleb. Isolde forcibly fed me juice. I got into the car to go to the police, but everything started swimming before my eyes. I couldn't see the road. And then I woke up here. Caleb was standing next to Warren. Caleb told me, "You are dangerous to yourself, Hannah. Mom will take care of you." He himself, he gave me to them. She grabbed my hand with her trembling fingers. There was unexpected, tremendous strength in her grip. "Run, Madeline. Leave him. Caleb is her extension. He will never take your side. He is too cowardly to admit his mother is a monster, because if he admits that, he has to admit that he himself helped her destroy us." I ran out of the quiet haven with a burning face. There was catastrophically little time left. Now I had Hannah's story, but Hannah had been officially declared incompetent. Any lawyer would have torn her testimony apart in court in 5 minutes. I needed a second living witness. Mila. According to the papers from the safe, Mila had managed to break free from the clinic 2 years ago thanks to the intervention of her sister Vera, who had purchased guardianship rights through the regional court. I ordered the taxi driver to go to the industrial settlement of Sosnovka, located 50 kilometers from the sanitarium. We arrived there when the sky was already covered with dark clouds and a cold rain had begun to fall. An old wooden house with slanted shutters looked abandoned, but a thin, grayish smoke was rising from the chimney. I ran onto the porch and began to pound frantically on the wooden door. The door didn't open immediately. A woman of about 40 appeared on the threshold, with a stern, stone-carved face, wearing a work jacket over a house robe. It was Vera, Mila's sister. "Who are you? What do you want?" she asked gruffly, not letting go of the heavy metal bolt. "My name is Madeline. I am the wife of Caleb Rivers." Vera's face instantly filled with leaden fury. "Get out!" she barked, and tried with all her might to slam the door. "Please, listen!" I managed to stick my foot in the opening. "Isolde is poisoning me with scopolamine right now. I am pregnant. If you don't help me, my child will die, and I will end up in the sanitarium next to Hannah." Vera froze. Her hand clutching the bolt trembled. She peered into my face, into the bags under my eyes, my trembling fingers, that very same wild, hunted look she had seen in her own sister several years ago. "Get in," she said shortly, and stepped back into the hallway. In a small room with a low stove, Mila sat by the window. She was young, no more than 30, but her posture expressed extreme exhaustion. She was knitting a scarf, methodically and slowly moving the needles. "Mila, you have a visitor," Vera said quietly. Mila raised her head. When her gaze met mine, there was no surprise on her face, only an infinite, all-consuming sorrow. "Another one," Mila whispered. Her voice was hollow. "She found Caleb a new victim." I sat across from her on a wooden chair and laid out on the table everything I had. A flash drive with the recorded conversation with Hannah, printed photos of the pages of Isolde's diaries, and a blank complaint form for the regional prosecutor's office. "Mila, Hannah is in the sanitarium. She's broken. But you broke free. You can talk," I said, leaning forward. "I sent the tea infusion to an independent laboratory in the next district. I have proof of the poisoning, but I need your and Vera's testimony so the prosecutor's office doesn't bury the case under pressure from Isolde's foundation." Mila laid the needles on her lap, her hands balled into fists. "Do you think Caleb will save you?" she asked. "No," I answered honestly. "I've realized it. Caleb is her instrument. But I want to save my child and put Isolde in prison." Mila looked at her sister. Vera nodded silently. "When Isolde started slipping me powders, for a long time I couldn't understand why my thoughts were getting tangled," Mila began to speak quietly. I would find things in my bag that I hadn't bought. I would forget where I parked the car, and Isolde would come to our house every day, stroke my head, and whisper to Caleb, "She is fading, son. We need to call Dr. Warren." Mila rose from her chair and walked over to an antique chest of drawers. She took a thick envelope out of a drawer and threw it in front of me. "These are prescription forms signed by Warren, which I managed to steal from his bag before I was taken away," Mila said. "They list the same drugs. I tried to go to our police with them. Do you know what happened?" "The police chief called Isolde," I exhaled. "Exactly. 2 hours later, Warren arrived with orderlies. They tied me up right in my living room, Madeline." Caleb stood by the window and looked out into the garden. He didn't even turn around when I screamed and begged him to help. He just said, "Mom knows what's best." My breath hitched. All the mosaic pieces had locked into a single picture. Isolde wasn't just a poisoner. She had created an absolute, impenetrable system of systematic violence, shielded by power, money, and the blind devotion of her broken son. "We will go with you to the regional prosecutor's office," Vera said firmly, standing next to her sister. "We will provide testimony, but you must come with us right now. If you go back to that house, Warren will inject you with a dose, after which you won't be telling anyone anything." I looked at my watch. It was 5 o'clock. Caleb and Warren must have been pulling up to my house by now. At that moment, my phone came to life in my purse. Caleb was calling. I answered and heard not only his voice in the background, but also the affectionate, triumphant whisper of Isolde. "Caleb, dear, tell her we are already walking into the apartment. Dr. Warren has prepared the vials. If Madeline doesn't open the door herself, we have a spare key." "Madeline, can you hear me?" Caleb's voice shouted through the phone. In the background, the clinking of glass vials from Dr. Warren's medical bag could be clearly heard. "Mom, the doctor and I are already in the hallway. Where are you? Why is it dark in the apartment?" I stood in Mila and Vera's old house. The rain drummed against the windows, and the room was filled with silence, broken only by the heavy breathing of 2 women whose lives had already been destroyed by this family. "Caleb, I've left," I answered, pausing for effect, "and I advise you to ask your mother right now where the diaries from her safe are." The line reacted instantly. On the other end, it wasn't Caleb's voice, but the icy, piercing shriek of Isolde, who had snatched the phone from her son. "You wretch! You went into my safe? Caleb, don't listen to her. She's mentally unstable. She robbed my house. Warren, prepare a strong sedative. She needs to be reported to the police as a danger to society." I hung up and pulled out the SIM card. "We don't have much time," Vera said, walking to the table and laying out another folder, old and yellowed with age. "If we want to destroy Isolde once and for all, a chemical analysis of the tea and our testimony won't be enough. Her lawyers will call it a woman's vendetta and a conspiracy of crazy ex-wives." "What are these papers?" I asked, examining the yellowed pages. "This is the file on Caleb's father, Arthur Rivers," Vera replied, looking me straight in the eyes. "Caleb told you his father abandoned the family and moved abroad when Caleb was 10, right?" "Yes. He always said his father was a traitor and an alcoholic." Vera gave a bitter laugh. "Caleb only knows what his mother planted in his impressionable mind. My father once worked in the city archives. When Mila was locked in the clinic, I combed through all the closed files. Arthur Rivers never went anywhere. He died 20 years ago in that same quiet haven." My head spun. I leaned against the edge of the table. "What?" "Arthur tried to file for divorce and take Caleb when he realized Isolde was a total psychopath controlling his every move." Mila joined in, her voice sounding firm for the first time, without a tremor. "Isolde used the exact same scheme on him. Symptoms of poisoning, fake reports from Warren, who was just starting his career back then, declaring him incompetent, and a quiet fading away in the asylum. Caleb isn't just a beloved son. Caleb is her trophy, the only property she protects with poisoning and neuroleptics." The puzzle snapped into place completely. Isolde had created a monstrous conveyor belt. A husband, the first wife, the second wife, now me. Every attempt to break free from her control was punished by the destruction of the person's identity through medication. And Caleb was trained to genuinely believe in the illness of his loved ones and thank his mother for saving them. "We aren't going to the prosecutor's office immediately," I said firmly, looking up at Vera and Mila. "Isolde has too many connections there. The papers would just gather dust for a few days, during which time Warren and Isolde would have enough time to find me and forcibly place me in a closed clinic." "So, what do you propose?" Vera asked. "We'll force them to act openly, in front of everyone." I called the private detective whose contact Vera had given me. For a substantial advance, he agreed to provide hidden audio and video equipment with live streaming capabilities to a secure server, as well as organize a support team of 2 independent lawyers from the regional center who were not controlled by the city authorities. The plan was risky. I had to return to my home. I had to play the role of the broken, frightened victim who had returned to beg for forgiveness. I knew Isolde's pride and overconfidence wouldn't allow her to suspect a trap. She would come herself to personally oversee the neutralization of her latest daughter-in-law. "You've lost your mind, Madeline," Mila whispered, squeezing my hands. "Warren will inject you with the drug right at the doorstep." "He won't. I'll have a hidden microphone and a portable camera under my collar, and the detective with the lawyers and a squad of regional police, not local, will be waiting in a car around the corner. As soon as Warren takes out the syringe and Isolde says even one word about the dosages, we give the signal." Vera looked at me with respect. "Mila and I will be in the car with the lawyers. If anything goes wrong, we will break into that house ourselves." It was about 9 in the evening when the taxi dropped me off at my house. The windows on the first floor were brightly lit. In the driveway stood Isolde's Mercedes and Dr. Warren's inconspicuous sedan. I adjusted my coat collar, checked the hidden microphone button, and took a deep breath. My baby kicked softly inside me. "It will all be okay, little one. We are ending this hell right now," I whispered to myself. I opened the door with my key and stepped into the hallway. The smell of lavender was so thick it took my breath away. They were waiting for me in the living room. Isolde sat in an armchair with a cup of tea, calm and majestic, like a queen on a throne. Dr. Warren stood nearby. His leather medical bag lay open on the table, and he held a prepared syringe filled with a cloudy liquid. Caleb sat on the sofa, head in his hands. At the sound of my footsteps, Caleb jerked his head up. A wild mixture of relief and horror flickered in his eyes. "Madeline, my God, where have you been?" He rushed toward me, but Isolde stopped him with a sharp gesture. "Sit down, Caleb," she said calmly. Then she turned her icy gaze to me. "Well, hello, Madeline. We've been waiting for you. You made a big mistake when you ran away. But Dr. Warren is already here. He will help you calm down." I took a few steps into the room, deliberately stopping right under the chandelier, where the micro-camera lens on my cardigan gave a perfect view of the entire room. "Isolde, what is in that syringe?" I asked, trying to make my voice sound slightly trembling, like a frightened victim. Warren chuckled professionally. "It's just a sedative, Madeline, a calming cocktail, to remove your aggression and delusions." "Delusions?" I turned to Caleb. "Caleb, your doctor is going to inject me with haloperidol and scopolamine. Your mother is poisoning me just like she poisoned Hannah and Mila. Caleb, open your eyes." "Madeline, stop," Caleb muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mom showed me your lab reports. She said you have severe psychosis." "What lab reports, Caleb?" I shouted. "Warren forged them, just like he forged your father's reports." At the mention of his father, Isolde flinched for the first time. A leaden, lethal fury flickered in her eyes. "Shut up, you wretch!" she barked, standing up from her chair. "You dare not speak my husband's name in this house. Warren, enough talk! Administer the drug. Caleb, hold her hands." Warren took a step toward me, raising the syringe to eye level. Caleb slowly rose from the sofa, looking at me with tears in his eyes. "Madeline, please, don't resist. It'll be better for everyone. Mom knows what she's doing." Warren grabbed my shoulder and pinned me against the wall, aiming the needle directly at my arm. Caleb reached out to grab my wrists. At that exact moment, I pressed the remote in my coat pocket, and from outside came the deafening roar of regional SWAT sirens, and the front door blew off its hinges from a powerful blow. The front door collapsed inward with a deafening crack that turned into an ultrasonic screech. The solid oak split along the grain, and heavy splinters flew across the hallway, striking mirrors and walls with a loud thud. Sob! Special Forces operatives in heavy black tactical gear stormed into the narrow space of the apartment instantly. Their movements were honed to absolute perfection, coordinated, rapid, without a single wasted step. "Stay where you are! Weapons and objects on the floor! This is the Regional Investigative Committee!" The team leader's voice thundered throughout the apartment. The sound vibrated in the air, making the glass cabinet doors tremble. Dr. Warren, who only a second ago had been defiantly holding the syringe over my vein, flinched in surprise. His manicured hand jerked, the syringe slipped from his fingers and shattered against the parquet floor with a chime. The poisonous clear liquid spilled onto the carpet, instantly leaving a dark, murky stain. Warren instinctively tried to bolt toward the window, covering his face with his hands, but two Special Forces soldiers were faster. A powerful shove, a short, harsh takedown, a shoulder slam into the wall, and a second later, the region's distinguished doctor was lying face down on the floor. Heavy steel handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists with a distinct, dry, metallic snap. Warren just groaned heavily, his nose pressed into a dusty corner of the hallway. Isolde Rivers stood in the very center of the living room. Her face had instantly lost its healthy flush and turned ash-gray, white as chalk. But even in this moment of catastrophe, she tried to maintain her famous aristocratic posture. She gripped the polished edge of the dining table with her fingers so hard her knuckles turned white and translucent. "What is this outrage?" Her voice broke from its usual velvety contralto into a hysterical shriek, revealing a primal, animalistic fear. "Do you even know who I am? Do you understand who you are touching? I head the City Board of Trustees. I personally donated millions to your department. I am calling the chairman of the regional court and the governor himself this instant." "Call whoever you want, Mrs. Rivers." The senior investigator for particularly important cases stepped forward with a calm stride, unzipping a leather folder. His tone lacked even a hint of aggression, only the cold, crushing certainty of a professional. "Your direct threats, your instructions to Dr. Warren regarding the neuroleptic dosages, and the attempt to forcibly administer psychotropic substances that was just recorded were all broadcast live. The recording went directly to the regional prosecutor's secure server. The audio and video were captured by 3 independent cameras. At that moment, the heavy front door opened wider, and Vera and Mila walked into the apartment. They were accompanied by 2 lawyers in sharp suits. When Mila crossed the threshold and looked Isolde straight in the eyes, without fear, without trembling, with a pure expression of hard-won triumph, the mother-in-law lost her balance for the first time in all these years. Her leg buckled, and she leaned heavily on the table with her elbow, nearly knocking over a crystal vase. "Hello, Isolde," Mila said quietly, but so clearly that the room fell into a deathly silence. "Your conveyor belt has stopped. You will never, ever send anyone else to the quiet haven." Caleb stood against the wall, completely lost. His eyes were wide with horror, his breathing ragged. His entire world, neatly constructed by maternal manipulation, was shattering into tiny shards right before his eyes. He looked at the broken syringe, at Dr. Warren in handcuffs, at Mila, whom he had considered a crazy ex, and finally, at me. "Mom," he whimpered, barely audibly, shifting his gaze to Isolde. "Mom, what's happening? What is she saying? What broadcast? What quiet haven?" "Shut up, you worthless fool!" Isolde screamed at him, dropping her mask of the benevolent mother and socialite for the first time. Her face was distorted with fury, her lips twisted into an ugly grimace. "I did it all for you. I was cleaning your life of this trash. of these broken, greedy, worthless sluts who tried to crawl into our home, rob us, and take you away from me. You were meant to belong only to this family." Those words sounded like a final, fatal gunshot. Caleb recoiled from his mother as if she had turned into a venomous snake in a split second. A horror and realization of his own multi-year blindness flared in his eyes, causing him to slowly slide down the wall onto the floor. He covered his face with his hands and began to wail, a dull, animalistic sound, drowning out his own sobbing groan of realization and shame. Searches at Isolde's country mansion and Dr. Warren's private clinic continued non-stop for 3 days. Investigators worked in shifts. From the secret safe hidden behind a tapestry in Isolde's library, they seized more than just the medical files of Hannah, Mila, and myself. They dug up things no one had even suspected, secret medical archives from 30 years ago. Inside were the original charts of Caleb's father, Arthur Rivers. As the forensic examination discovered, Arthur had not died 20 years ago from a sudden massive stroke, as reported in the newspapers. Isolde had been slowly poisoning him with the same drugs when he had tried to initiate a divorce and deprive her of access to the company's assets. The trial of Isolde Rivers, Dr. Warren, and the management of the Quiet Haven became the biggest scandal in the region's history. Dozens of journalists stormed the courtroom every day. Isolde's lawyers, the best in the city, who received astronomical fees, tried to build a defense until the very end. They claimed Isolde acted out of hyperparenting, suffered from a psychological disorder, and that the video recording was obtained through procedural violations. But the state prosecution presented an ironclad evidentiary base. Toxicology results. An independent laboratory from the Ministry of Health confirmed the presence of life-threatening concentrations of haloperidol and scopolamine, both in the brew extracted from my cardigan and in the swabs taken from Warren's shattered syringe. Victim testimony. Mila and Vera's testimonies were supplemented by detailed audio recordings from Hannah. After being taken off the drugs, Hannah underwent 3 months of rehabilitation, and her memory returned completely. She described in detail how Isolde personally brought Warren to their home and how her condition worsened after every herbal tea. Diaries and dosage charts. Isolde's handwritten notebooks, where she had recorded with the pedantry of a maniac. Day 14. Madeline is confusing the days of the week. Increased dose by 2 drops. Caleb believes these are symptoms of her fatigue. During the court sessions, Isolde sat in a glass cage. Without her usual elaborate hairdo, without her vintage gold rings, and in a simple gray prison uniform, she looked like a withered old hag. But icy hatred burned in her eyes. She never once admitted her guilt, claiming to the judges until her final word that she was saving her son from parasites. Dr. Warren, fearing a life sentence, was the first to break. He gave exhaustive testimony against Isolde, describing the scheme in detail. For every forged diagnosis and illegal commitment of a daughter-in-law, he received fictitious grants through Isolde's charity foundation in the amount of tens of thousands of dollars. The court's verdict was absolute. Isolde Rivers was sentenced to 19 years in a general regime penal colony with confiscation of all personal property in favor of the victims. Dr. Warren received 15 years in a maximum security colony with a lifetime ban on practicing medicine. The head physician and director of the Quiet Haven received 12 and 10 years respectively for complicity in torture and illegal deprivation of liberty. 9 months have passed. Hannah has fully recovered. Through the courts, lawyers managed to annul all fictitious certificates of her incompetence and return her apartment and savings to her. She, Mila, and Vera didn't just become acquaintances. They founded a non-profit center to help women facing psychological violence and gaslighting. I filed for divorce immediately after the investigation was completed. Caleb didn't miss a single court session, but he didn't try to challenge any of my demands. He renounced his share of his mother's inheritance, signed over the house, and donated all his remaining money to our support center. On the day the official divorce decree entered into legal force, Caleb was waiting for me on a bench outside the courthouse. It was a dry, warm summer. Caleb looked like he had aged 20 years, completely gray temples, a stooped back, and a completely extinguished gaze. "Madeline," he called out quietly as I walked down the steps. "Please, just 2 minutes." I stopped at a safe distance. My stomach was already large, less than 3 weeks left until the birth. "I am not asking for forgiveness." His voice trembled violently. He looked at the ground. "I know that forgiving such a thing is impossible. I was blind. I was a coward. I believed her because it was easier for me that way. I helped her destroy those I loved myself. I will carry this cross for the rest of my life." "Why did you approach me, Caleb?" I asked calmly and coldly. "I just wanted to say, I have transferred all my personal accounts to the name of your future child. Through lawyers. I will never appear in your lives if you don't want me to. I am not claiming paternity. I have no right to it." "My child will carry my maiden name, Caleb," I replied, looking him straight in the eyes. "And when my daughter grows up, I will tell her the whole truth, unfiltered. But she will never in her life know what it's like to live in the shadow of someone else's madness, control, and fake love. If you truly want to atone for even 1/100th of your guilt, learn, finally, to be a man and not a puppet." I turned and walked toward the taxi waiting at the curb, without looking back. Behind me remained the past nightmare, the suffocating scent of lavender, and years of destructive lies. 3 weeks later, in a bright room at the perinatal center, my daughter was born, a healthy, loudly crying girl. When the midwife first placed her on my chest, and the bright July sun shone outside the window, I felt the heaviness that had been with me for months finally leave my chest. We made it. We survived. And now we are absolutely free. And now, the most important part. Write in the comments what you think. Does Caleb deserve even a drop of sympathy as a person who lived his whole life under his mother's psychopathic control? Or does his silent consent and blindness make him a full accomplice in all of his oldest crimes? Be sure to write your opinion below. I read absolutely every single one of your comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Bye!